Today's tragic star is going to be Farrah Fawcett. We're going to look into why she was so tragic, why she died at a relatively young age, and maybe who could have saved her. So let's dig into Farrah Fawcett's sad, tragic life. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Tragic Hollywood Star of the Week. Sorry I missed last week. So this week's tragic star is Farrah Fawcett. If you grew up in the 70s or you were young in the 70s and you watched TV, and all of us watched TV because we didn't have the internet and we all watched the same 3 channels, ABC, NBC, and CBS, then you probably know who Farrah Fawcett was. She was on, hundreds of commercials before she ever started making films and before she was ever cast in Charlie's Angels, which of course skyrocketed her to stardom. Hard to believe she was only on Charlie's Angels for 1 year. Before we get into Farrah Fawcett, I just want to say I appreciate your support. Really would appreciate it if you would like and subscribe and leave a comment. Also, watch my video because I need the watched hours in order to monetize. I'm not monetized. I'm doing all of this for free right now. The other thing I wanted to say, in case you hear some weird noises, they're putting solar panels on my roof right now. So you're going to hear maybe a couple of drill bits and some hammers. Anyway, I'm just going to power through it. Sorry. Apologize in advance for that. Okay, Farrah Fawcett. So I was saying she was very well known in the 70s. Even before she went on Charlie's Angels, she came from Corpus Christi, Texas. She was a Texas girl. And she came out of the womb with a brilliant, perfect teeth smile of hers and her wonderful mane of golden blonde hair, natural golden blonde hair, although she did put frosted highlights in it. That was all the rage in the 70s. She did put frosted highlights in it. It was a natural honey blonde color. She was naturally beautiful. She didn't have to have her teeth straightened because they were notoriously perfect. And when she went to high school, she was voted most beautiful girl. And she held that title for the entire 4 years of her high school. When she went to the University of Texas, her freshman year, she was voted most beautiful co-ed. And supposedly that was the first time that a freshman had ever been so honored with that title. She was a cheerleader and she did all the things that popular girls do. Let's not kid ourselves. She was of the top in her class in the hierarchy, so to speak, of high school and college. So she had it going on from the very beginning. Someone sent her photographs off to an agent in Hollywood, and he immediately called her up. I think she was still a freshman at the University of Texas when he called her up and asked her to come out to Hollywood. And she said, "Oh, no, thanks. I'm going to finish my education." Well, this guy wouldn't give up. He literally pestered her for another 2 years. And finally, when she was just starting her junior year, she asked her parents if she could take a year's leave of absence and go give this Hollywood thing a try. And they agreed to let her do this. They're strong Catholic parents, very religious. They went to mass. She went to mass every Sunday when she was growing up. So she had a good, solid religious background. So they thought, okay, why not? So they let her go ahead and go out to Hollywood. I think she might have been by herself, and she was only 20 years old. Well, she made an immediate impression. She was so stunning that she started getting parts in commercials and bit parts in TV shows and things like that. And of course, we remember her. One of her main commercials that she was cast in at this time was the Noxzema commercials with Joe Namath, who was this very famous football player at the time, professional football player. And she was doing a Noxzema commercial. Noxzema was this cream that you used to be able to use, kind of an all-purpose face cream. I used to use it actually to wash my face and take my makeup off. But men used it they were trying to push it to men to use it as a shaving cream. And she would come over there, and she somehow made shaving cream sexy and naughty by smearing Joe Namath's face with this shaving cream, this Noxzema, and saying, "Let Noxzema cream your face." Yeah, that was pretty heavy stuff, pretty naughty stuff for 1970s commercial, like an ad on major networks that, aired across major networks. And she just became extremely famous for that particular commercial, but she did many, many commercials. She did the Ultra Bright commercials where she got to show off her teeth. She did the Mercury Cougar commercials in which her co-star on those commercials was an actual cougar. And she did the the shampoo commercials because she got to show off her amazing golden locks. So she was famous before she got cast on Charlie's Angels. And before she was cast on Charlie's Angels, she was also in a few movies. And one of those movies was Logan's Run. Logan's Run is, in my opinion, it still holds up today as one of the best sci-fi films that they could have come up with. The 70s in particular, there's no CGI, it's just stuff like that. And Logan's Run was really impressive with their special effects, and the storyline was really powerful too. I love Logan's Run, and she had a bit part in it, but it was kind of a memorable part. And so that was when she really got her foot in the door. And then she also starred in that bizarre Mae West, Raquel Welch thing called Myra Breckenridge. And that movie was just weird, okay? Just all around weird. But she was also noticed in that movie too. So she, shortly after she moved to LA, she met Lee Majors, the Bionic Man, and he was well on his way to a career. And he had co-starred in The Big Valley for many, many years with Barbara Stanwyck, and then he got his own series called The Bionic Man. It was a very popular series, and he was making a lot of money. He was well known. He was really good looking. So she hooked up with him, and she married him, and that was her only marriage. So some of you all think she married Ryan O'Neal, but they never got married. She was married only to Lee Majors, who the marriage didn't really work out. He wanted somebody to be there when he got home from filming. She had her own filming schedule. By this time, she had been cast on Charlie's Angels. She had her own filming schedule, so she wanted somebody to be at home and cook the meals, but he wanted her to be there to cook the meals, and he was really controlling. And she came from Texas, a good Southern girl, and initially she put up with it, but after a while, this grew tiresome for her. And so the marriage kind of limped along for about 10 years. They never had children. That was another sticking point. They never seemed to find time to either have children or even make time for each other because of their busy schedules. So the marriage eventually ended. And part of the reason the marriage ended was, of course, because Ryan O'Neal and Lee Majors were friends. And when Ryan O'Neal went out of town, when Lee Majors went out of town, he asked Ryan O'Neal if he could keep Farrah company while he was gone. Okay, so yeah, that's how Ryan O'Neal and Farrah Fawcett met. This relationship would last 30 years, on and off and on and off. It was a destructive relationship for Farrah. I don't think it was a healthy relationship for either of them. It would produce a son whose name was Redmond, who, for lack of a better word, was a hot mess and still is. And he blamed the dysfunctionality of his parents' relationship when he was younger on all of his problems when he got older. We'll talk more about Redmond. But this is how the relationship with Ryan O'Neal developed early on. And they really fell hard for each other, and they made a beautiful couple. They were dating, and they moved in together before she was even divorced from Lee Majors, who suddenly realized maybe that was a dumb idea, asking one of the hottest, most handsome, most charismatic actors of the day to keep his wife company while he was away. I need to back up a little bit and talk about what made Farrah famous before Charlie's Angels. And one of the pieces of memorabilia that made her famous was when she did the poster, the bathing suit poster, in which she posed in a red bathing suit against a Mexican-style multicolored blanket background. She threw her head back and she's give this dazzling. So there's actually several poses of this, but the most famous one is where she's throwing her head back and she's laughing and she's kind of grabbing her hair like this. Of course, she's got little nip slips in this really, really thin. But it was a one piece because she didn't like wearing two pieces. She had an appendectomy scar. And she didn't. It's very rare to see a picture of her in a two-piece bathing suit. She was very self-conscious of that scar. Farrah Fawcett is going to be in my new big book, and I thought I would read this part that describes how this poster came to be. Farrah agreed to sit for the poster photographs if they used the photographer she recommended, Bruce McBoom. She also wanted final say on which photographs they used, and they agreed to her wishes. The photo shoot was set to take place at the home where Farrah and Lee Majors were living at the time. She did her own makeup and hair, as she always did. Initially, she wore a bikini during the first photo, but neither she nor McBoom liked the results. So she changed into her own one-piece dusty red suit, and McBoom brought out a Mexican-style blanket he used to cover his seats in his car and used it as a backdrop. Farrah sat down, pulled one leg up, and rested her arm on her knee while her hand touched her hair as the other arm was positioned behind her for support. She then threw her head back and gave a dazzling smile to the camera. The shutter clicked, and the rest is history. So this poster just went crazy. It's become the most iconic, best-selling poster of all time. And I think in 2012, it was put in the Smithsonian as an iconic part of the collective American culture. So it made a big deal. And she made more money from that poster than she made in any of her films or commercials. So I think she made more money from that poster than she did being on Charlie's Angels. So yeah, it was a big deal. It was a big deal at the time. Everybody wanted to know who she was after that. She was cast on Charlie's Angels. This was before she met Ryan O'Neal, when she was still living with Lee Majors and married to Lee Majors. She was cast on Charlie's Angels. Charlie's Angels was a silly little show. When I think back on it, I'm not sure why it was so popular, but everyone watched it, including me. You know, these three women, police women, who were being wasted in the police academy. They get a call from this mysterious man named Charlie, who runs an independent investigative agency. And he calls them, and he knows just how to use their sex appeal to solve these tough cases for his wealthy clients. So we never get to see Charlie. We only hear him. We only hear his voice on the phone. Bosley is the one that manages everything. And then, of course, he called them his angels, and that's how we get Charlie's Angels. And initially, Farrah said, I think maybe they like us because of our acting, but now I realize it's because none of us wear bras. That's why we're so popular. And she was probably right. The acting was pretty abysmal. The plots were ridiculous. You know, I'm not going to hold Charlie's Angels up as, the greatest television show to ever come out of the 70s, because that's simply not true. There were really good shows in the 70s, but Charlie's Angels was just what we used to call TNA entertainment, fluff, TNA, that type of thing, like Love Boat. There's a lot of shows like that around in the 70s. So, yeah. But anyway, Charlie's Angels made her an absolute mega superstar. She was the breakout star. So her co-stars were Jacqueline Smith and Kate Jackson. Kate Jackson was hired for the most money because she had the most acting experience. She was the better known actress. Jacqueline Smith was hired because she was just stunning. She was pretty perfect. Really had a lot of admiration for Jacqueline Smith. I actually thought she was prettier than Farrah Fawcett, but that was the minority opinion, clearly. Farrah had the flashier looks, the golden lion's mane, literally a lion's mane framing her face. She has turquoise eyes. She's got perfect skin. She's the whole package. So the show just became phenomenally popular, and Farrah became famous beyond anything she'd ever experienced before. She was superstar famous. So she became so famous and so well known that she only stayed on that show for a year before she went looking for greener pastures. She wanted to be a movie star. She wanted to do some real acting, and the plot lines and Charlie's Angels was nowhere to do any real kind of acting. Aaron Spelling, who had originally cast her on Charlie's Angels, was absolutely furious, and they spent a few tangles in court over this because she had signed a 5-year contract. But finally, they agreed on a settlement, and she was let out of her contract. And so she went off and tried to make it in the movies. And by this time, she was with Ryan O'Neal, whose movie career pretty much peaked with Love Story and Barry Lyndon, and then slowly declined after that. He was the hottest actor after Love Story. Everyone loved Ryan O'Neal. Everyone thought he was amazing. But he never really followed up that phenomenal film with anything substantial. Barry Lyndon was actually pretty good. He did star with Barbra Streisand in a really well-received romantic comedy called What's Up, Doc? The other movie that he did really get well in was Paper Moon with his own daughter, Tatum O'Neal. She was the youngest actress ever to receive an Academy Award for Best Actress, I believe, in that film. But after the 80s, I'd say the mid-80s, his career just started diving. Farrah Fawcett struggled to get film roles, and so she moved to television roles, and she did quite well with many of her television roles. Some of her more notable roles in television was in The Burning Bed, where she played an abused woman who sets her husband on fire while he's sleeping, and her defense was domestic violence. She also starred in Small Sacrifices, about the true story about the mother who killed her children. And one of the notable scenes in that movie is her tapping her feet to the song that was played while she was killing her children. And in the courtroom, she started tapping her feet and kind of doing her hands on the desk like this to that song. And she was a real psycho. And Farrah Fawcett played that to perfection. She spent the 80s on television, but they were good roles. They were meaty roles, and she really did a good job. She got nominated several times for Emmy Awards for these roles, and so she was doing pretty well. I'm going to read this section of my new book, which is coming out in the fall, fingers crossed. This is regarding Farrah and Ryan's relationship. Trouble began almost immediately after they began seeing each other exclusively. Ryan, like Majors, was rife with toxic masculinity and controlling nature. Unlike Majors, he spiked these traits with domestic, physical, and mental abuse. 2 years into their relationship, Farrah gave birth to her first and only child in 1985, a boy named Redmond. The child would prove to be some of the source of constant heartbreak for Farrah from his teens onward. She and Ryan spent the decade arguing and torturing each other, often in front of the child. According to O'Neal, in his autobiography, Both of Us, My Life with Farrah, during one particularly intense argument, their 6-year-old son suddenly appeared in the bedroom doorway holding a butcher knife to his chest. "If you don't stop, I'm going to stab myself," he said. that would be an early warning sign of Redmond's mental health issues. I mean, wow, really? Narcissistic people raise mentally ill children, in my opinion. This was sad. This was actually really sad. And considering the way Redmond ended up, very sad. So they spent the decade, the turbulent decade, in and out, moving in with each other, moving out, kicking each other out, all sorts of things. Okay. So, yeah, it was not good. It was not a good relationship. It just wasn't good. And Farrah moved into the 90s. She was getting older. The parts were fewer and far between. She posed for Playboy, painted. Her nude body was painted in like a gold color. It actually reminded me of that James Bond movie, Goldfinger, where you find the girl murdered and she's murdered by being painted gold. And I guess she's supposed to have been smothered by that. She couldn't breathe because all her pores were clogged with paint. Anyway, that's what these photo shoots remind me of. I'd post a picture, but there's a lot of people who might take offense at this, so I guess I won't post a picture. She moved into the 90s. Her and Ryan were on again and off again. And then, tragically, just as she was getting and filling out the wind in her sails and getting a new career, and she's becoming a sculptress, and she was very good at this. And to this day, her sculpting work, I think it's at the University of Texas, and she sold some of these sculptures for quite a bit of money. Just as she's getting a new wind in her, she ditched Ryan. She came home one day. She found him in bed with another woman right below the Andy Warhol portrait of herself in her bed with another woman. So she just ditched him and told him to get out. And so he did. And they were apart for a few years. And she was getting the wind back in her sails. She was learning to become independent. And on a trip back visiting her parents, and I think she was doing a reality show called Chasing Farrah. And in this reality show, the camera would chase Farrah, and she would go to various places. And one of the places she went was back home to Corpus Christi. And it was during this visit that she noticed that there was blood in her stool. And she became a little alarmed, but she didn't really think. She'd had symptoms before this, before she noticed the blood. She, like a lot of people, like busy lives, we don't think anything's really seriously wrong, so we ignore these symptoms. So that's what she did. She ignored the symptoms. But she shouldn't have, because when she had it checked out, they confirmed that she had rectal cancer. Rectal cancer is not the same thing as colon cancer. Rectal cancer is rare, and there's only a couple of ways you can get it. And I'm not even certain I can tell you those ways. Maybe you should figure it out. Needless to say, there is speculation that she might have gotten this from Ryan, and he might have been partially responsible for giving her the virus that led to this cancer. And that's all I'm going to say on that, because he had some interesting sexual preferences. I'll just leave it there. Okay. So she found out she had cancer, and this began a several years battle with cancer, which she documented. She had her friend film everything, and it was eventually put together as a documentary and released on television while Farrah was still alive, but barely. It wasn't very well received. People didn't like seeing Farrah like this. She delayed chemo because it was going to make her hair fall out, and Ryan said, "Oh, I wouldn't put that poison in me. That's going to make your hair fall out." So she listened to him, and she delayed the chemo, and that was another bad decision. I'm not sure if it would have made a difference, but sadly she died. This disease took its toll. It wasn't a pretty death. She was in immense pain. When she wasn't in pain, she was just unconscious. It it was horrendous. Meantime, her son is going in and out of jail. He's getting in and out of trouble with the law. Eventually, he would had attempted murder charge pinned on him, but Ryan paid for a really good defense attorney, was able to get him released. Get him charged with not guilty get the prosecutor to accept not guilty by reason of insanity, but he had to be committed to a mental institution for the criminally insane for indefinitely, which that is where Redmond is now. But unfortunately, this was a constant source of heartache for poor Farrah, who was dealing with dying as well. She had just lost her mother a year before she found out about her cancer. She had lost her mother unexpectedly, and that really did a number on her, because her and her mother were very close, and then she ended up coming down with cancer herself and dying, I believe, just about 5 years after her mother. So her poor father, I was thinking, and because I believe he's still alive, her poor father lost his wife and his daughter, and the sister had died before that of cancer. So wow, her sister had died. So I think within 5 years he lost everyone. So that was really sad. So in 2007, she thought she had beaten it because her cancer had gone into remission. And she was so elated and so happy. And everyone around her was celebrating. But unfortunately, just 3 months later, the cancer came back. And it came back with a vengeance. And she even went abroad to try to engage in some experimental treatments with stem cells. And it was hard for her to take these treatments, but unfortunately they didn't work. The cancer just ravaged her. She was kept on palliative care for a while, and then Redmond, who was in jail at the time for drug possession, was brought to her bedside, shackled, and allowed to say goodbye to his mother, and brought back to jail. And then she was put into the hospital, where she fell into a coma, and she died on June 25th in 2009. This would have made all the papers. This would have been big news. Everybody would have been talking about Farrah Fawcett dying. But she had the misfortune of dying on the same day as Michael Jackson. And so her death was completely overshadowed by Michael Jackson's death, because it was so unexpected. And so, people were stunned when Michael Jackson died at the age of 50. People were like, what the hell? What happened? And everybody had kind of been anticipating Farrah's death because she had been fighting cancer for so long. But she died and was buried at Pierce Brothers. Again, Redmond was brought in shackles and allowed to attend her funeral, and then put back in jail. Eventually, Redmond, after his dad paid for his defense and succeeded in keeping him out of prison for 20 years, getting him put into a mental hospital, Redmond cut all ties with Ryan O'Neal. Ryan O'Neal would eventually die of leukemia. His cancer came back, and he would die of leukemia in 2023, not before he penned an autobiography about his life with Farrah, in which he denied any sort of type of domestic or mental abuse whatsoever, which is laughable. Did I mention that at one point Ryan O'Neal tried to shoot his own son with a gun? And I'm not talking Redmond. It was Patrick O'Neal, I think. He had like 3 other sons, and as well as Tatum O'Neal. This was with another mom. So, by all accounts, Ryan O'Neal wasn't a very good person. But unfortunately, he's buried right next to Farrah. So he worked that out so that he could be buried right next to her. So, yeah. That's the sad story of Farrah Fawcett. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. If you made it this far, thank you. I am so grateful. Thank you so much. I apologize for the weird noises. Hopefully that won't be around next week. Okay, that'll wrap it up for this week, and I will see you guys next week.